Known widely for its award-winning programs about life in modern Japan, the media production group is at work on a portrait of urban life in Japan in the 17th century, a biography of Edo when it was a new city. In 1590, Tokugawa Ieyasu picked a frontier outpost called Edo to be the seat of his domain. A victory 10 years later gave him control over all of Japan and raised Edo to be the country's new capital. In one of history's great orgies of city building, Edo became the hub in a galaxy of more than 200 regional castle towns linked by a nationwide web of roads. By the end of the 17th century, Edo had raised itself in another way. It became the center of a cosmopolitan culture whose citizens created art, drama, and literature that continue to draw world attention even today. And by that time, Edo also had become the most populous city in the world, larger even than Beijing or London or Paris. Through it all, the samurai continued to wear swords, but most of them became clerks and engineers, supervisors and architects.
Yes, they were engineers as well as soldiers. This was terribly important for the building of the city of Edo and all the other cities of the time. They had to have technical skills that went far beyond the martial arts. And there's a tremendous eagerness to continue to think of them primarily and almost exclusively as military men. But they had a variety of skills. They were cultured writers of poetry. Many of them could be artists as well.
Edoites themselves were fascinated by the new world they were constructing. In Raising Edo, we are using their images and their words to convey the creative tension that energized their world. Our MPG team is familiar with the visual legacy of Edo. We built 2 of our earlier programs around Edo period images.
For glimpses of everyday life in Edo at that time, we can turn to this bird's-eye view of the city painted in the 1630s and spread across a pair of 6-panel folding screens. The gold leaf clouds draped across the picture are like fade-outs in a film. As our eyes move across banks of clouds, we see events that happened at different times and in different places. That's how these 2-dimensional screens are able to depict activities that took place across more than a decade, and how the shogun himself, his face hidden here by a red umbrella, is able to appear in more than a dozen different scenes across the landscape. The screens were probably meant to be presented to the 3rd shogun. They celebrate the peace and prosperity of his reign, with a focus on daily life as public spectacle.
In views of Edo, the city is orderly, and the activities of the samurai elite, who were perhaps half of the population, occupy fully the top 3/4 of the panorama. But in famous places in Edo, commissioned by merchants a few years later, the samurai have been pushed to the margin. Commoner actions and entertainments are what dominate the cityscape. And we're treated to views of cockfights and lion dances and brawls. In views of Edo, samurai and commoners alike are reverently reading the official edicts posted at Nihonbashi. But in famous places in Edo, everybody ignores them.
I think one of the most appealing things about this project to study the birth of Edo and Edo culture is partly exactly in its visuality. The screens, for example, are a good example of the kind of art which are very large in scale and very fine in detail that are most effectively conveyed on film. In other words, it lends itself to modern reinterpretation and representation on film. These are objects that even if you have them in front of you are very difficult to study.
We've done the basic research. We've visited sites and structures in today's Tokyo that appear already in early Edo paintings. And we've obtained permission to photograph both the structures and the art collections. With your support, we can move into full production. help us transport viewers back into the streets of early Edo. Help them to understand what happens when a great metropolis springs into being.